When 7 ravens follow you for 15 years, people don't ask questions. They cross the street. Marin had learned to live with the whispers, the fear in their eyes, the way mothers pulled their children close when she passed. But when the Alpha King himself rode into her forsaken village, demanding she hunt the monster who had slaughtered her family, she faced an impossible choice: stay hidden in her cursed solitude or follow the birds that had saved her life into the jaws of vengeance itself. Stay until the end to see how an Omega marked by death becomes the weapon that brings down an empire. Drop a like and comment which city you're watching from. The first raven arrived on the night Marin's world drowned in blood. She was 7 years old, small for her age, with eyes too wide and a scent too faint, an Omega in a pack that prized strength above all else. The screaming had started just after moonrise, tearing through the settlement like claws through flesh. Her mother had shoved her into the root cellar, pressing a desperate kiss to her forehead. "Don't make a sound," her mother had whispered, voice cracking. "No matter what you hear." Marin had obeyed. She'd stayed silent through the howls, through the wet sounds of tearing, through her mother's final scream that cut off mid-breath. She'd stayed silent until dawn crept through the cellar cracks, painting the dirt floor in strips of pale gold. When she finally climbed out, the settlement was a graveyard. Bodies everywhere. Her father, throat torn open, eyes staring at nothing. Her sister, barely 14, broken like a discarded doll. 37 people, 37 members of the Ashwood pack, slaughtered in a single night. And there, perched on her father's cooling corpse, sat a raven. Black as burnt wood, eyes like obsidian chips. It cocked its head at her, made a sound halfway between a croak and a word, then flew north. Marin had followed it. What else could she do? She was 7, alone, and the metallic stench of pack blood was already drawing scavengers. The raven led her through the forest for 3 days, guiding her to streams when she grew thirsty, cawing warnings when wolves, real wolves, not shifters, drew near. By the time she stumbled into Thornhaven, 6 more ravens had joined the first. 15 years later, they still hadn't left. "Cursed thing," Old Beryl muttered as Marin passed her vegetable stall. The woman made a warning gesture, gnarled fingers twisted in the old sign against evil. "Those birds ain't natural." Marin didn't respond. She'd learned years ago that defending herself only made things worse. The ravens perched on the roof above her, a line of black judgment against the gray morning sky. 7 of them, always 7, never more, never less. They'd followed her from village to village, settlement to settlement. Everywhere she went, they appeared within hours, silent witnesses to her isolation. "My daughter says they watch her sleep," a younger woman hissed to her companion, loud enough for Marin to hear. "Through the window, just sitting there staring." "Mark of death, that's what they are," the companion replied. "Everyone knows ravens gather for corpses." Marin pulled her hood lower and kept walking. Thornhaven was a frontier village, barely more than a collection of wooden buildings clinging to the edge of the Northern Territories. Beyond it stretched the wildlands, untamed forest where rogues and worse things roamed. It was the kind of place people came when they had nowhere else to go. Perfect for someone like her. Her cottage sat on the village outskirts, isolated enough that the ravens didn't disturb too many neighbors. It was small, barely more than a single room with a sleeping loft. But it was hers. She'd bought it with money earned from healing work, one of the few services people would accept from a cursed Omega. They might fear her, but when their children ran fever or their elders grew sick, they needed her knowledge of herbs and remedies. They just made sure to leave the payment on her doorstep rather than hand it to her directly. One of the ravens, she'd long ago stopped trying to tell them apart, swooped down to land on her shoulder as she approached the cottage. Its weight was familiar, almost comforting. She'd never touched them, never tried to, but they seemed to have no such reservations about her. "What do you want?" she murmured. The bird made a low clicking sound in its throat, then launched itself skyward to rejoin its companions. Marin had just reached for her door handle when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Lots of them, moving fast. The ravens exploded into flight, their croaks sharp and urgent. They circled her cottage in tight spirals, a behavior she'd learned meant danger. Her heart kicked against her ribs as she turned to see riders cresting the hill, 20, maybe 30 of them, armor glinting in the weak sunlight. Soldiers. Not local militia, but real soldiers, bearing the crimson and black banner of the Northern Territories. The Alpha King's men. Marin's first instinct was to run. She was an Omega. Running was written into her bones, the primal response to threats she couldn't fight. But the ravens were diving and swooping, blocking her path to the forest. When she tried to move toward the back of the cottage, they drove her forward, toward the approaching riders. "What are you doing?" she hissed at them. The birds ignored her, their aerial dance growing more frantic. The riders pulled up in front of her cottage in a cloud of dust. The lead horse was massive, a black destrier that would have made her entire cottage look small. The man astride it was equally imposing, easily 6.5 feet of solid muscle, with the kind of presence that made the air feel heavier. Alpha. The word echoed through Marin's instincts before her conscious mind could catch up. Not just any alpha, but a powerful one, the kind whose dominance could make weaker wolves drop to their knees from sheer proximity. He swung down from the saddle with predatory grace, and Marin got her first clear look at him. He was younger than she'd expected, early 30s perhaps, with sharp features that might have been handsome if they weren't set in such harsh lines. Dark hair, nearly black, pulled back from a face marked by a scar running from his left temple to his jaw. Eyes the color of storm clouds tracked her every movement. "Marin Ashwood?" His voice was deep, carrying the weight of command. She shouldn't have been surprised he knew her name. Cursed Omegas weren't exactly common. "Who's asking?" "Darian Thornridge, Alpha King of the Northern Territories." He said it simply, as if announcing he was a blacksmith or a merchant. "I need your help." Marin almost laughed. Almost. "I'm a healer. If you need medical attention, I'm sure the castle has—" "I don't need a healer." He cut her off, gaze flicking to the ravens still circling overhead. "I need someone who can track what can't be tracked, someone marked by death itself." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd spent 15 years trying to escape that reputation, trying to be more than the cursed child who'd survived a massacre. And here was the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories, seeking her out specifically because of it. "I don't know what you think I am," she said carefully, "but I'm just an Omega who happens to have ravens follow her around. I can't track anything." "You're lying." Not accusatory, just matter of fact. "You survived the Ashwood massacre, alone, at 7 years old, in the middle of winter. You made it 50 miles through hostile territory to Thornhaven without training, without supplies, without a pack. That's not luck, Omega. That's guidance." He gestured to the ravens. "They led you. They've been leading you ever since, and now I need them to lead you to someone else." Marin's stomach went cold. "Who?" "Voss the Bloodless, rogue alpha, responsible for 17 pack massacres over the last 20 years. Darian's expression went flat, emotionless in the way that meant the emotions underneath were too large to safely show. "Including the Ashwood slaughter." The world tilted. Marin had spent 15 years not thinking about that night, burying it so deep that sometimes she could almost pretend it had happened to someone else. But hearing the name, Voss, brought it roaring back. The screaming, the blood, her mother's final kiss. "Why?" Her voice came out barely a whisper. "Why would you think I could find him when your entire army can't?" "Because he's a ghost. No scent trail, no pattern, no territory. He strikes and vanishes, and we've never gotten close to catching him." Darian's jaw tightened. "But your ravens, they're not normal birds. They found you after the massacre. They followed you for 15 years. I think they're connected to him somehow. I think they can track him." "That's insane." "Is it? Ravens are carrion birds. Death draws them, and Voss leaves death everywhere he goes." Darian took a step closer, and Marin had to force herself not to back away. 3 nights ago, he hit a settlement 40 miles from here. 23 dead, including children. I tracked him to the forest edge and lost him. But this morning, as I was riding back, I saw your ravens circling in a pattern I've never seen before, agitated, almost frantic. Marin glanced up. The birds were indeed acting strangely, diving and rising in sharp movements, their calls harsh and urgent. "I can't help you," she said. "I'm not a tracker. I'm not a fighter. I'm just a survivor." Darian's voice softened slightly. "The only survivor of a Voss attack. Don't you want justice for your pack?" "Justice won't bring them back." No, but it'll stop him from creating more orphans like you. The words landed like a blade between her ribs. Marin looked at the soldiers behind Darian, hard men and women with weapons and scars, people who'd chosen to hunt monsters. Then she looked at her cottage, small and isolated and safe. Except it wasn't safe, was it? Nowhere was safe while Voss was alive. He could come here tomorrow, slaughter everyone in Thornhaven, and she'd be 7 years old again, hiding in a cellar while her world ended. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "what exactly are you asking me to do?" "Travel with my unit. Let the ravens guide us. When we find Voss, you stay back while we handle the actual fighting." Darian's expression was unreadable. "I'm not asking you to fight, just to help us find him." "And if I say no?" "Then I leave, and Voss keeps killing, and eventually he might circle back this way." Darian shrugged. "Your choice." It wasn't really a choice, and they both knew it. Marin had spent 15 years running from her past, and here it was, delivered directly to her doorstep by an alpha king and 7 ravens who wouldn't let her escape. "How long?" she asked. "However long it takes. Could be days, could be months." Darian's gaze held hers. "I won't lie to you. It's dangerous. Voss is smart, vicious, and he has followers. People will die before this is over. But if you help us end him, you'll have the gratitude of the crown. Land, title, protection, whatever you want." Marin didn't care about land or titles, but protection, that was tempting. To live somewhere without whispers, without fear, without being the cursed girl everyone avoided. To maybe, finally, be free of the ravens and everything they represented. "I need to pack," she heard herself say. Darian nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "We leave within the hour. Bring warm clothes and anything you'll need for extended travel. We'll provide weapons and—" "I don't use weapons." "Then you'll stay behind the lines. That's not negotiable." One of the ravens landed on Marin's shoulder, heavier than it should be, like it was trying to tell her something. She looked into its black eyes and saw her own reflection, distorted and strange. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked Darian. "The truth." For the first time, something cracked in his controlled expression. Pain, sharp and raw, flashed across his features before he locked it down. "Because Voss killed my brother 5 years ago. Tore him apart in front of his mate and newborn daughter." Darian's voice went flat. "My niece still has nightmares. My sister-in-law took her own life 6 months later, so when I say I'm hunting Voss, understand that I won't stop until one of us is dead. You're either with me or you're in my way." The honesty was brutal, but Marin appreciated it more than pretty words. They were both driven by vengeance and loss, tied together by the same monster. She nodded. 1 hour. Packing took less time than expected. Marin didn't own much: clothes, herbs, her mother's old journal that she couldn't read without crying. She strapped her healing supplies to a pack, pulled on her warmest cloak, and stood in her cottage doorway for a long moment. This might be the last time she saw it. She might die out there in the wildlands, torn apart by Voss or something worse, but at least she'd die doing something instead of hiding. The ravens were waiting outside, all 7 perched on the fence. When she emerged, they took flight as one, circling overhead in tight formation. Darian had organized his soldiers efficiently. Supply horses loaded with gear, scouts positioned at the perimeter, a tight formation that spoke of military discipline. He'd saved a horse for her, a gentle mare, older but steady. "You know how to ride?" he asked as she approached. "Well enough." Marin had learned young, before the massacre. Some skills you didn't forget. Darian helped her up, his hands careful, professional, then swung onto his own mount. "Northerner," he called to a scarred man near the front. "Take point. Kara, rear guard. Everyone else, standard formation." "What about her?" A woman with a shaved head and multiple scars across her face jerked her chin at Marin. "We really trusting in Omega to lead us to Voss? Those birds could take us anywhere." "Those birds are our best lead in 5 years," Darian said sharply. "She comes, or we spend another 5 years chasing ghosts. Anyone have a problem with that?" Silence. The woman, Kara, Marin guessed, looked like she had plenty of problems with it, but knew better than to argue with her alpha king. "Ravens," Darian said, looking at Marin. "Can you ask them to show us the way?" "I don't control them," Marin said. "They're not pets. Then how? He cut off as the ravens suddenly dove, swooping past the assembled soldiers in a rush of black wings. Several horses shied nervously. The birds flew north toward the wildlands, then circled back, cawing urgently. I think that's pretty clear, Darian said dryly. Move out. The company set off at a steady pace, soldiers falling into practiced formation around Marin. She rode near the middle, hyper-aware of the armed warriors surrounding her. These were alphas and betas, every one of them, strong and skilled and dangerous. She was the weakest person here by a considerable margin. The ravens flew ahead, always visible, their black forms stark against the gray sky. They'd pause occasionally, waiting for the company to catch up, then surge forward again. They've never done this before, Marin said to Darian, who'd dropped back to ride beside her. Led people, I mean. Usually they just follow me. Maybe they've been waiting for this. Darian's eyes tracked the birds with intense focus. Waiting for someone to actually hunt Voss instead of just running from him. You sound like you think they're intelligent, like they're planning this. Aren't they? He glanced at her. 15 years they've followed you. Never leaving, never dying, never increasing in number. Normal ravens don't do that. Normal ravens don't lead lost children to safety or guide hunters to their prey. Marin had spent years telling herself they were just birds. Strange birds, yes, but still birds. Hearing Darian voice what she'd secretly feared, that they were something more, made her skin crawl. What do you think they are? She asked quietly. Honestly? I don't know. My grandmother used to tell stories about spirit animals, creatures sent by the old gods to guide or guard. But those are just stories. He paused. Then again, so was Voss the Bloodless, until he murdered my brother. They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the creak of leather, the thud of hooves, and the occasional harsh caw from the ravens. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat. Marin found herself sitting slightly apart from the soldiers, not by choice, but because they naturally gave her space. Cursed Omega, death-marked. The whispers followed her even here. You gonna eat that or just stare at it? Marin looked up to find Kara standing over her, arms crossed. Up close, the woman was even more intimidating, muscled like a fighter, with the kind of scars that came from surviving more than one serious battle. I'm eating, Marin said, taking a bite of dried meat to prove it. Good. Last thing we need is you fainting from hunger when those birds find Voss. Kara's expression was hard to read. I don't trust you, Omega, but the Alpha King does. And that's enough for now. Just know that if you lead us into a trap, I'll kill you myself before whatever's waiting gets the chance. Understood. Kara nodded, seemingly satisfied, and walked away. Marin watched her go, feeling the weight of all the eyes on her. These soldiers had lost friends and family to Voss. They wanted his head, and they'd tolerate her only as long as she helped them get it. One of the ravens landed near her feet, cocking its head. It hopped closer, made a low clicking sound, then flew off to rejoin the others. They like you, a new voice said. A younger soldier, barely out of his teens, approached with a friendly smile. The ravens, I mean. I'm Jace. Marin. I know. He sat down, seemingly unbothered by her reputation. My mom used to say ravens were good luck, that they carried messages between the living and the dead. Most people think they're bad luck. Most people are idiots. Jace's grin widened. I figure if those birds led you to safety when you were 7, they must be on your side. Which means they're on our side now, so I'm calling that good luck. It was the first genuinely kind thing anyone had said to Marin in years. She found herself smiling back just a little. Let's hope you're right. They set off again soon after, pushing deeper into the wildlands. The forest grew thicker, older, the trees massive and gnarled with age. This was the kind of place where people disappeared, where rogues and worse things hunted. The ravens flew faster now, their calls more urgent. Darian urged the company to greater speed, and Marin's mare kept pace, surprisingly sure-footed despite the rough terrain. As dusk approached, the ravens suddenly veered east, diving into a particularly dense section of forest. Darian called a halt. That's rogue territory, Northerner said, studying the trees with obvious unease. Lost a whole patrol in there 2 years ago. Never found the bodies. Then we proceed with caution. Darian's hand moved to his sword. Weapons ready. Scouts forward. Marin, stay in the center. They entered the forest in tight formation, every soldier on high alert. The trees blocked out most of the remaining light, leaving them in premature twilight. Marin's heart hammered as branches clawed at her cloak, as shadows seemed to move in her peripheral vision. The ravens had disappeared into the canopy, but she could hear them calling, sharp, insistent caws that echoed through the trees. There, Kara pointed to a clearing ahead. Something's there. They emerged into an open space, and Marin's stomach turned. Bodies. At least a dozen, scattered across the clearing in various states of decay. Some were fresh, killed within the last few days. Others had been there longer, reduced to bones and scraps of clothing. Voss? Someone whispered. No. Darian dismounted, moving among the bodies with grim efficiency. These are rogues. See the scars? The pack marks that have been cut away? These are exiles and outcasts. Someone's been hunting them. Voss hunts rogues? Jace sounded confused. Sometimes, when he needs to test new followers or just wants sport. Darian's voice was tight with anger. These people might have been exiles, but they didn't deserve this. One of the ravens landed on a nearby corpse, pecking at something near the body's hand. Marin approached carefully, and the bird hopped aside, revealing a small carved stone. What is it? Darian appeared at her shoulder. Marin picked up the stone, turning it over. Symbols had been etched into the surface. Old pack marks, the kind used before the modern territories were established. I've seen this before, she said slowly. In my mother's journal. It's a warning mark, used to indicate territory claimed by a powerful alpha. Voss's territory? Maybe. Marin pointed to the symbols. These represent death, winter, and blood. Not exactly subtle. Darian took the stone, examining it closely. How far from here was your settlement? The Ashwood pack? Maybe 20 miles east. Why? Because if this is Voss's territory, and your pack was nearby. Darian's eyes met hers. He might have been here 15 years ago when he attacked them. Which means the ravens led you through his territory to escape. They know this place. A chill ran down Marin's spine. She'd always assumed the ravens had led her randomly, just getting her away from danger. But if they deliberately guided her through Voss's own territory to escape him, they're smarter than we thought, Darian said quietly. And they're leading us somewhere specific. The question is where? As if in answer, the ravens exploded from the trees, all 7 flying in tight circles above a narrow trail leading out of the clearing. Their caws were deafening, frantic. That's not good, Kara muttered. No, Darian agreed. But it's a lead. We make camp here tonight, fortified position. Tomorrow, we follow that trail and see where it takes us. The soldiers set up camp with military precision, perimeter guards, fire pits, supply distribution. Marin helped where she could, mostly staying out of the way. When the camp was established, she found herself sitting near the fire, watching the ravens perch in the trees above. Darian joined her, carrying 2 bowls of stew. He offered her one without a word. Thank you, she said, accepting it. They ate in silence for a while, the crackling fire and distant sounds of soldiers talking filling the space between them. You scared? Darian asked eventually. Marin considered lying, then decided against it. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He stared into the fire. I've been hunting Voss for 5 years. Lost count of how many leads went nowhere. How many times I thought I had him only to find empty camps and cold trails. This is the closest I've ever been. And if we find him, what then? Then I kill him. Simple, direct, no hesitation. Whatever it takes. Revenge won't bring your brother back. No. But it'll stop Voss from taking anyone else's brother. Darian looked at her. That enough for you? Marin thought of the children in Thornhaven, the families who'd taken her in over the years despite their fear. Thought of Jace with his kind smile and his mother's stories about ravens. Yes, she said. It's enough. Above them, the ravens settled into the trees, silent sentinels against the darkening sky. Tomorrow they'd follow the trail, deeper into territory that Voss had claimed with blood and terror. But tonight, for just a moment, Marin let herself believe they might actually succeed. that the ravens had led her here for a reason, that 15 years of running was finally coming to an end. One way or another, she'd face the monster who'd destroyed her childhood. And maybe, just maybe, she'd survive it. The fire crackled. The soldiers talked quietly among themselves. And somewhere in the darkness, Voss the Bloodless waited, unaware that his past was coming for him on black wings and burning determination. The hunt had truly begun. Dawn broke cold and gray, the kind of morning that felt like a warning. Marin woke to find frost coating her bedroll and the ravens already circling overhead, their calls sharp and insistent. Around her, the camp stirred to life. Soldiers checking weapons, tending horses, speaking in low voices that carried an edge of tension. "They've been doing that for an hour," Jay said, nodding at the ravens as he handed Marin a cup of something hot and bitter. Louder than usual, like they're angry about something. Marin watched the birds spiral and dive, their movements jagged and aggressive. "They want us to move." "Yeah, well, so does the Alpha King." Jace jerked his thumb toward where Darien stood with his senior officers studying a hand-drawn map. "Been up since before sunrise, planning the route." Marin took a sip of the bitter drink, some kind of herbal tea, and winced. "What is this?" "Camp brew. Keeps you warm and awake. Tastes like dirt, but it works." Jace grinned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Found 3 more bodies during the night watch, fresh ones, killed maybe 12 hours ago." The warmth from the tea turned cold in Marin's stomach. "Voss?" "Probably, or his followers." Jace's expression darkened. "Kara says it's a message, that he knows we're coming." Before Marin could respond, Darian's voice cut through the camp. "Pack up, we move in 10. The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, breaking camp faster than Marin would have thought possible. Within minutes, the clearing was empty except for the fire pits they'd dug and the bodies they'd covered with stones, a temporary grave until they could send word for proper burial. Marin mounted her mare, feeling the weight of exhaustion in her bones. She'd barely slept, too aware of the bodies in the clearing, too haunted by memories of another massacre 15 years ago. Every shadow had looked like a threat, every sound like approaching danger. "You ready?" Darien asked, pulling his horse alongside hers. In the gray morning light, the scar on his face looked deeper, more pronounced. "Does it matter if I'm not?" "No." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "But I appreciate the honesty." The ravens dove past them in a rush of wings, heading for the trail they'd indicated last night. Darien raised his hand, and the company fell into formation, scouts ahead, main group in the middle, rear guard watching their backs. They followed the trail deeper into the forest, and with each mile the trees grew more twisted, the shadows darker. This was old forest, the kind that existed before humans or shifters had claimed these lands, the kind where the rules were different. "This doesn't feel right," Kara muttered, riding close to Darien's other side. "Too quiet. No birds, no animals, nothing." She was right. The normal sounds of the forest, birdsong, rustling leaves, the scurry of small creatures, were absent. Even the wind seemed muted, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The only sound was the ravens, their harsh caws echoing through the silence like accusations. Around midday, the trail opened into a ravine, steep walls on either side, narrow passage through the middle. The ravens circled above it, diving and rising in obvious agitation. "I don't like this," Northerner said, studying the ravine with narrowed eyes. "Perfect ambush point. We go in there, we're sitting targets." "Agreed," Darien said. "But the ravens are clear. Whatever we're hunting, it's through there." "Or it's a trap," Kara said bluntly. "Those birds could be leading us straight into Voss's jaws." All eyes turned to Marin. She felt the weight of their suspicion, their doubt. They'd tolerated her presence because Darien commanded it, but they didn't trust her, didn't trust the ravens. And now, faced with obvious danger, that distrust was turning into something harder. "The Omega's birds want us in a kill box," a soldier called from the back. "That sound right to anyone else?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the ranks. Marin saw hands drift toward weapons, saw the shift in posture that meant violence was being considered. "Stand down," Darien's voice cracked like a whip. "All of you." "With respect, my lord," Kara said carefully, "we have to consider the possibility that we're being led into a trap. Those ravens could be working for Voss. Hell, the Omega herself could be—" Finish that sentence and you'll regret it. Darian's tone went deadly soft. Marin is under my protection. Anyone who suggests otherwise answers to me personally. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Marin wanted to speak, to defend herself. But her Omega instincts were screaming at her to stay quiet, stay small, don't challenge the alphas in their dominance display. I'll go through first, she heard herself say. Every head turned toward her. Darian's expression went carefully blank. Absolutely not. If it's a trap, I'll spring it. Better one Omega than your entire company. Marin kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. The Ravens won't hurt me. They've never hurt me. If Voss is waiting in there, at least you'll know before you commit everyone. That's actually not terrible logic, Northerner said thoughtfully. It's suicide, Darian snapped. We're not using you as bait. You're already using me as a tracker. What's the difference? Marin met his storm-gray eyes. I volunteered for this. Let me do something useful besides sit in the middle of your formation and be resented. Kara made a sound that might have been approval or disgust. Hard to tell. Several soldiers nodded, clearly warming to the idea of the cursed Omega taking the risk instead of them. No, Darian said flatly. We find another way. There is no other way. Marin gestured to the ravine walls. It would take hours to climb those, and we'd be exposed the whole time. The trail goes through the ravine. The Ravens are indicating the ravine. So we either go through or we give up and go home. She's right, Kara said reluctantly. I hate it, but she's right. Darian's jaw worked, muscles jumping beneath the skin. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Marin could almost see the war happening behind his eyes. Commander versus protector, logic versus instinct. Fine, he said finally, but you don't go alone. I'll go with you. My lord, Kara started. Not negotiable. Marin scouts ahead. I watch her back. The rest of you wait here. If we're not back in 30 minutes, or if you hear fighting, assume the worst and find another route. Darian's expression brooked no argument. Kara, you're in command while I'm gone. The scarred woman looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded instead. 30 minutes. Not a second more. Darian dismounted, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. Marin slid off her mare, her legs unsteady. This was insane. She was walking into potential death with an alpha king she'd known for barely a day, following birds that might or might not have her best interests at heart. But turning back felt worse somehow, like she'd spent 15 years running and this was her chance to finally stop. Stay close, Darian said quietly. If anything feels wrong, you tell me immediately. Your instincts are probably better than mine in some ways. Because I'm an Omega? Because you've been surviving on instinct your whole life. He started toward the ravine entrance. That makes you an expert. The Ravens dove ahead of them, disappearing into the narrow passage. Marin followed, acutely aware of Darian behind her, a solid presence, armed and dangerous. The ravine walls rose on either side, close enough that she could touch both with outstretched arms. The temperature dropped as they went deeper, the sun blocked by the high walls. Marin's breath misted in front of her face. Her footsteps seemed too loud, echoing off the stone. This is definitely a trap, Darian murmured. I know. So why are we still walking into it? Because the Ravens have never led me wrong before. Marin paused, listening. And because something about this feels familiar. Familiar how? She couldn't quite explain it. A scent on the air, maybe, or the way the shadows fell. Something that tugged at memories she'd buried deep. I think I've been here before, she said slowly. A long time ago. The ravine opened abruptly into a bowl-shaped clearing and Marin's breath caught. She had been here before. The rocks, the layout, the massive fallen tree at the far end, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. This is where they found me, she whispered. After the massacre, the Thornhaven patrol that took me in, they found me right there, under that fallen tree. Darian's hand went to his sword. The Ravens led you here? To where you ended up after your pack was slaughtered? Before Marin could answer, the Ravens exploded from the trees, shrieking. Not their usual cause, but something higher, more urgent. Warning. Move! Darian shoved Marin toward the rocks as shapes dropped from the ravine walls. Rogues, at least a dozen of them, dropping with predatory grace, cutting off the exit. They were half-shifted, that horrible in-between state where they were neither fully human nor fully wolf, just nightmare combinations of both. Fangs and claws and two intelligent eyes. "Well," a voice drawled from near the fallen tree, "look what the ravens dragged in." A figure stepped into the clearing, and Marin's entire world narrowed to a single point of recognition. She'd only seen him once, 15 years ago, in the chaos of the massacre. But some faces burned into memory, especially when they were the last thing your mother saw before she died. Voss the Bloodless was smaller than she'd imagined, maybe 6 feet tall, lean rather than bulky. He looked almost normal, with sharp features and dark hair graying at the temples, but his eyes were wrong, empty, like looking into a void that wore a human face. "Darian Thornridge," Voss said pleasantly. "I was hoping you'd come personally. Saves me the trouble of hunting you down." "Voss," Darian's voice was pure ice. 15 years I've waited for this." 5 years for me," Voss corrected, "since I killed your brother, though I admit I barely remember him. They all blur together after a while." His gaze shifted to Marin, and something flickered in those dead eyes. "But you, I remember. The little Omega who hid in the cellar while I slaughtered her pack. You've grown." Marin couldn't speak, couldn't move. She was 7 again, listening to her mother scream, drowning in the scent of blood. "Leave her alone," Darian snarled, putting himself between Marin and Voss. "Oh, I intend to do more than leave her alone." "Do you know why the ravens follow her, Thornridge?" Voss smiled, and it was the most terrible thing Marin had ever seen. "Because I sent them. 15 years ago, when I killed her pack, I marked her. My ravens, my gift. She's been mine all along, leading me to every pack I've destroyed since. She's my compass, my little bloodhound, and she doesn't even know it." "You're lying," Marin managed, but her voice sounded hollow. "Am I? Tell me, Omega, how many villages have you lived in over 15 years? 6, 7? And how many of them suffered attacks after you left? How many people died because you brought my ravens into their midst?" Marin's mind raced, counting. Thornhaven was her 7th village. The one before that, Redwater, had been attacked 3 months after she'd moved on. She'd heard about it from a traveling merchant, 23 dead. Before that, Millstone, wiped out 2 months after her departure, 16 dead. "No," she whispered. "Yes." Voss's smile widened. "You've been marking my targets your whole life. Every time you settle somewhere, my ravens tell me where to strike next. You're the best weapon I ever created, and you had no idea." The world tilted. Marin felt Darian's hand on her arm, steadying her, but it wasn't enough. If Voss was telling the truth, then she'd spent 15 years inadvertently helping him murder innocents. Every village she'd lived in, every family who'd taken her in despite their fear, she'd condemned them. "She didn't know," Darian said, his voice tight. "It's not her fault." "Isn't it?" Voss cocked his head. "She could have ended herself years ago, stopped the pattern. But she was too much of a coward, too busy surviving to care about the bodies left in her wake." "Enough!" Darian drew his sword. "We're ending this now." "You think so? You and one traumatized Omega against me and my pack?" Voss gestured to the rogues surrounding them. "Your soldiers are too far away to help. By the time they realize you're not coming back, you'll both be dead." "Then we die fighting," Darian said. "Better than living with your existence." The rogues tensed, ready to attack. Marin's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. This was how she died, in the same clearing where she'd been found as a child, having learned she'd been a weapon for her family's killer all along. The ravens dove, all 7 of them, dropping like black arrows straight at Voss. He threw up his arms, snarling, as they raked at his face with their talons. The rogues lunged, and Darian met them with his blade, moving with lethal precision. But there were too many. Marin saw one rogue break through, heading straight for her. She stumbled backward, knowing she had no chance, no weapon, no way to... The rogue's head exploded. Marin blinked, confused, until she saw Kara standing at the ravine entrance with a crossbow. Behind her, the entire company poured into the clearing, weapons drawn. 30 minutes, my ass, Kara shouted, reloading. "We heard the birds screaming and came running." The battle turned into chaos. Steel clashed against claws, soldiers against rogues, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Darien fought his way toward Voss. The Ravens continued their assault, diving and striking, giving Darien openings he ruthlessly exploited. Marin pressed herself against the rock wall, trying to stay out of the way. A rogue lunged at her, and she rolled aside, feeling claws scrape across her shoulder. Pain bloomed, hot and sharp. "Stay down!" Jace appeared, driving his spear through the rogue's chest. "Don't move!" But Marin couldn't stay down, because through the chaos she saw Darien and Voss locked in combat, and Darien was losing. Voss was faster, more brutal, fighting with the kind of savagery that came from having nothing to lose. "Your brother begged," Voss said conversationally, blocking Darien's strike. "Begged me to spare his daughter. Said he'd do anything. Want to know what I made him do before I killed him?" Darien roared, abandoning technique for raw fury. His blade sliced across Voss's ribs, drawing blood. But Voss just laughed and caught Darien's wrist, twisting. Bone cracked. Darien's sword fell from nerveless fingers. Marin moved without thinking. She grabbed a fallen dagger from a dead rogue's hand and ran. Not at Voss, but at the nearest raven. The bird was perched on a rock, watching the battle with those black eyes. "If you're his," she shouted at it, "then stop this. Call him off." The raven cocked its head, made that strange clicking sound. Then it launched itself at Voss's face, talons extended. The other 6 followed. Voss screamed, a sound of pure rage, as the raven swarmed him. He released Darien, both hands going to his face, trying to protect his eyes. Blood ran down his cheeks where talons had scored deep. Darien didn't waste the opening. He scooped up his sword with his good hand and drove it through Voss's chest. For a moment, everything went still. Voss looked down at the blade protruding from his sternum, expression almost surprised. Then he looked at Marin, and his bloody lips curved into a smile. "Doesn't matter," he whispered, "already dead inside, both of us." Darien twisted the blade and pulled it free. Voss collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. The remaining rogues broke and ran. The soldiers let them go, too exhausted to give chase. The clearing fell silent except for labored breathing and the moans of the wounded. Marin stood frozen, the dagger still clutched in her hand, staring at Voss's corpse. The ravens had settled on the rocks around him, silent now, watching. "Is he dead?" Kara asked, approaching cautiously. Darien checked for a pulse, then nodded. "He's dead." A cheer went up from the soldiers, ragged but genuine. They'd done it. They'd killed the monster who'd terrorized the Northern Territories for 20 years. But Marin felt nothing, just a vast, empty coldness spreading from her chest to her limbs. "Marin?" Darien limped toward her, cradling his broken wrist. "Are you hurt?" "He said I was his weapon," she heard herself say, "that I led him to every pack he destroyed. He was lying, trying to break you before he died." "Was he?" Marin looked at Darien, at the blood on his face, the pain in his eyes. "Think about it. 7 villages I've lived in. How many were attacked after I left?" Darien's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping in. "Even if it's true you didn't know. You're not responsible for his actions." "Aren't I? All those people, dead because I brought his ravens to their doorstep." Marin's hand shook, the dagger falling from her fingers. "Thornhaven. I've been there 3 years. If the pattern holds, then we station soldiers there," Darien said firmly. "We protect it, but you can't blame yourself for what a monster did." One of the ravens flew to Marin's shoulder. She flinched, expecting she didn't know what. Violence, maybe. Proof of Voss's claim. Instead, the bird gently preened a strand of her hair, the gesture almost affectionate. "They saved you," Darien said quietly, "both today and 15 years ago. Whatever Voss said, those birds aren't his. They're yours." Marin wanted to believe him, but as she looked at Voss's corpse, at the soldiers celebrating their victory, all she could think about was Redwater, Millstone, and 5 other villages that might have survived if she'd never existed. "We need to move," Kara announced. "Wounded need tending, and those rogues might come back with reinforcements." The company began organizing, efficient despite their exhaustion. Darien moved to help, but his broken wrist made him clumsy. Marin found herself automatically assisting, her healer training overriding her emotional turmoil. They left Voss's body where it fell. Let the scavengers have him. As they rode out of the ravine, Marin looked back once. The ravens remained behind, perched on rocks around the corpse, all 7 of them, utterly still, watching, waiting, and she still had no idea what they really were or what they wanted from her. The ravens caught up to them 3 hours later. Marin had been watching the sky, part of her hoping they'd stay behind with Voss's corpse, that maybe his death had broken whatever connection bound them to her. But as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, she heard the familiar harsh caws and looked up to see all 7 birds diving toward the company. Several soldiers flinched, hands going to weapons. Darien, riding beside Marin with his wrist now splinted and bound, raised his good hand in a calming gesture. "Stand down. They're not attacking." The ravens settled into the trees flanking the trail, pacing the company as they had before. Silent now, just watching with those unreadable black eyes. "I don't like it," Kara muttered from Darien's other side. "Voss is dead. Why are they still following her?" "Because they were never his to begin with," Darien said, but he sounded less certain than before. Marin said nothing. She'd stopped trying to understand the ravens years ago. All she knew was that they were part of her life, as permanent and inexplicable as the scars on her soul. They made camp as dusk fell, in a defensible clearing with good sightlines. The mood was strange, celebratory and subdued at once. They'd killed Voss, achieved what had seemed impossible, but the cost was written in bandages and empty saddles. 5 soldiers had died in the ravine. 7 more were badly wounded. "Could have been worse," Northerner said as he helped set up the perimeter. "Could have been all of us." "Still feels like too many," Jace replied quietly. He'd taken a claw across his shoulder during the fight, deep enough to need stitches. Marin had sewn him up herself, her hands steady even as her mind churned. As night deepened and the soldiers settled around the fires, Marin found herself unable to rest. The weight of Voss's words sat like stones in her chest. She needed air, space, distance from the celebration she didn't feel part of. She slipped away from the main camp, moving toward the tree line where the ravens perched. None of the soldiers stopped her. They were too busy passing around flasks and telling stories of the battle, already turning it into legend. Running away? Marin turned to find Darien approaching, his injured arm held carefully against his chest. Even exhausted and wounded, he moved with that predatory grace that marked him as alpha. "Just needed quiet," she said. "Mind if I join you?" She shrugged, and he settled onto a fallen log nearby, close enough for conversation but far enough to avoid crowding her. For a while they sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of the camp and the rustle of ravens in the branches above. "I sent riders ahead," Darien said finally, "to Thornhaven and the other villages you've lived in. They'll station guards, increase patrols. If Voss had followers still operating, they won't get close." "Thank you." The words felt hollow. "You don't believe it'll help?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." Marin pulled her cloak tighter. "What if he was telling the truth? What if I really did lead him to those places?" "Then you did it unknowingly, and the blame still rests on him." Darien's voice was firm. "You were a child when this started, Marin, a traumatized 7-year-old trying to survive. Whatever the ravens are, whatever connection they have to Voss, you didn't choose it. But I'm not 7 anymore. I'm 22, and I've lived in 7 villages, and 6 of them were attacked after I left." She finally looked at him. "That's not coincidence." "No," he admitted. "It's not, but it's also not your fault." One of the ravens dropped from its perch, landing on the log between them. It cocked its head, studying Marin with those depthless eyes, then made that strange clicking sound in its throat. "What are you?" Marin whispered to it. "Why won't you leave?" The bird hopped closer, close enough that she could have touched it if she'd dared. For 15 years she had never tried, too afraid of what it might mean. But now, with Voss dead and the truth about the villages burning in her mind, she reached out. Her fingers brushed midnight feathers. The world exploded into sensation. She was running through snow, tiny legs burning with exhaustion, lungs screaming for air. Behind her, screams and the wet sounds of slaughter. Her mother's voice, cut off mid-plea. The metallic stench of blood so thick she could taste it. Then darkness. A cellar, cold and rank. Shapes moving above, footsteps, something heavy dragging across the floor. Her sister's body, probably, or her father's. She pressed her hands over her mouth to keep from sobbing, from making any sound that might draw the monsters back. Hours passed, or days. Time lost meaning in the dark. When she finally emerged, the ravens were waiting. They led her north, away from the carnage, through territory she couldn't have navigated alone. When she grew too tired to walk, they cawed until she found the strength to continue. When she was hungry, they led her to berry bushes and streams. When wolves approached, they shrieked warnings. But the memories didn't stop there. They kept going, playing out in rapid succession. Redwater, where she'd lived for 6 months. She saw herself leaving in early spring, saw the ravens circling overhead. Then the perspective shifted and she was looking down at the village from above, seeing it through the ravens' eyes as they flew south, straight to where Voss waited with his pack of rogues. The same pattern repeated. Millstone, Ashford, Greentree. Every village she'd ever called home, the ravens mapping a path from her departure to Voss's arrival. Not because she was cursed, not because Voss had marked her, because the ravens were protecting her by sacrificing others. Marin jerked her hand back, gasping. The vision shattered, leaving her kneeling on the ground with Darian's good arm around her shoulders. What happened? His voice was sharp with concern. Marin, talk to me. They knew, she managed, her voice breaking. The ravens, they've been leading Voss away from me. Every time I settled somewhere, every time I started to feel safe, they'd mark the village for him. Not to help him hunt, to keep him away from me. That doesn't make sense. Why would they? Because I'm important to them somehow. Because they need me alive. Marin looked up at the ravens perched above, feeling something cold and terrible settle in her chest. Voss was right. I am their weapon, just not in the way he thought. Darian's expression went carefully neutral. What did you see? She told him everything, the visions, the memories, the pattern of protection and sacrifice that had marked her entire life. With each word, his face grew harder, more closed off. So they've been using innocent people as bait, he said when she finished. Sacrificing villages to keep you safe. Yes. Why? I don't know. Marin stood, wrapping her arms around herself. But I'm done. I'm done running, done letting others die for me. Whatever the ravens want, whatever I am to them, it ends now. What are you going to do? Marin looked at the birds, at those 7 identical shapes perched in perfect silence. I'm going to find out what they are. And then I'm going to end this, one way or another. Before Darian could respond, a shout came from the camp. They turned to see Kara running toward them, her expression grim. We have a problem, she said. Big one. They followed her back to the main camp, where the soldiers had gathered around something on the ground. As Marin pushed through the crowd, her stomach dropped. It was a body. One of the scouts they'd sent ahead to Thornhaven. His throat had been torn out, and carved into his chest were symbols. The same pack marks that had been on the stone they'd found in the clearing. Death, winter, blood. There's more, Northerner said grimly, gesturing to a piece of parchment clutched in the dead scout's hand. Darian took it, read it, and his face went white. What? Marin demanded. He handed her the parchment without a word. The message was written in blocky letters, crude but clear. Voss was the wolf. I am the winter. Come to Thornhaven by dawn, or I paint the village red. Come alone, Omega, or they all die screaming. No signature, none needed. It's a trap, Kara said flatly. Obviously. Doesn't matter. Marin crumpled the parchment in her fist. I'm going. Like hell you are. Darian's voice cracked like a whip. We don't negotiate with terrorists, and we sure as hell don't send in single operatives to obvious ambushes. Those are my people, the only village that's ever let me stay longer than a year. I won't let them die because of me. You walk into Thornhaven alone, you die. Then they probably die anyway. Darian grabbed her shoulder with his good hand. We do this smart. We take the whole company, we evacuate the village, we hunt down whoever sent this, and end them. There's no time for that. Dawn is 6 hours away and we're half a day's ride from Thornhaven. Marin pulled free of his grip. Besides, you're forgetting something. Whoever sent this knows about the ravens, knows about me. If I don't show up alone, they'll know, and people will die. People will die anyway, Kara interjected. This is an execution, not a negotiation. Someone wants you dead, and they're using Thornhaven as bait. Then I'll die. Marin said it simply, like discussing the weather. But maybe I can buy enough time for you to get there and evacuate the village. Maybe my death means something instead of just being another name on Voss's list. The ravens exploded into flight, all 7 of them, shrieking. They dove at Marin, wings beating against her face and arms, driving her back. Even they disagree, Darian said. But Marin barely heard him. Because as the ravens swarmed her, images flooded her mind again. Not memories this time, but visions of what could be. Thornhaven in flames, bodies in the streets, children screaming, Old Barrel's vegetable stall burning, the woman herself lying broken among her goods. And standing in the center of it all, a figure she didn't recognize. Tall, wrapped in furs that seemed to move like living things, face hidden behind a mask of bone. The winter, the message had said. Not a person. A thing. A force. The visions cut off abruptly, leaving Marin gasping. The ravens settled on the ground around her in a protective circle, still agitated, but no longer attacking. What just happened? Jace asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. They showed me what happens if I don't go. Marin's voice shook. Thornhaven burns. Everyone dies. Whatever this thing is, it's worse than Voss, stronger, more vicious. All the more reason to bring an army, Darian insisted. No. Marin straightened, decision crystallizing. You bring an army, it kills everyone out of spite. I go alone. I might be able to talk to it, learn what it wants. It wants you dead. Maybe. Or maybe it wants something else. And Thornhaven is just leverage. Marin met his eyes. I have to try. For a long moment, Darian said nothing. Then he turned to his soldiers. Everyone out, now. I need to speak with Marin privately. The soldiers dispersed, though Kara looked mutinous. When they were alone as they could be with 7 ravens watching, Darian's controlled expression finally cracked. I can't let you do this, he said quietly. I brought you into this hunt. I asked you to help find Voss. If you die because of it, then I die doing something that matters. Marin's throat tightened. Don't you see? I've spent 15 years being the cursed girl, the Omega everyone fears, letting others pay the price for my survival. This is my chance to finally pay it back, to save people instead of leading monsters to their doors. That's not your responsibility. Isn't it? Those ravens are mine, Darian. Whatever they are, whatever they want, they're connected to me, which means every death they've caused, every village sacrificed, that's on me too. She stepped closer. Let me do this. Let me try to save Thornhaven. If I fail, at least I fail trying. Darian's jaw worked, and she could see the war in his eyes. Finally, he exhaled hard. I'll give you until noon. You go to Thornhaven, you see what this thing wants. But my soldiers will be in position around the village by mid-morning. If this goes wrong, we're coming in. That'll get people killed. You going in alone might also get people killed. At least this way we have options. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip gentle despite his intensity. Promise me you'll be smart. Promise me you won't throw your life away on some misguided guilt trip. I promise to do everything I can to survive, Marin said. It wasn't quite what he'd asked for, but it was the best she could offer. They stood there for a moment, close enough that she could feel his warmth, see the flecks of lighter gray in his storm-dark eyes. Then he released her and stepped back. You leave in an hour. That gives you time to prepare and still reach Thornhaven before dawn. His voice had gone back to Commander Flat. Take supplies, weapons. I won't use weapons. Then take them anyway. Sometimes just having them is enough. He turned away, then stopped. And Marin? Come back alive. That's an order. She wanted to make a joke, something to cut the tension, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she just nodded. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. Marin packed light, water, dried meat, her healing supplies. Jace brought her a dagger, insisting she take it even when she protested. Kara provided a detailed map of Thornhaven's layout and surrounding terrain, along with hand signals the soldiers would watch for. 3 fingers up means evacuate immediately, the scarred woman explained. Hand over your head means trap. Stay back. Flat palm down means proceed with caution. She paused. And if you go down, we're coming in. No debate. Understood. As Marin prepared to leave, she noticed the soldiers watching her differently. Not with fear or suspicion, but with something closer to respect. She was still the cursed Omega, still marked by death. But now she was also the woman walking into an obvious trap to save a village that had barely tolerated her existence. The ravens were waiting by her horse, all 7 perched on the saddle. When she approached, they took flight, circling overhead. "They're going with you," Darian said. It wasn't a question. They always do. He helped her mount, his injured arm making him awkward. For a moment his hand lingered on hers. "If this goes bad," he said quietly, "I want you to know that meeting you, hunting with you, it's been an honor." "Don't," Marin said, her voice rough. "Don't say goodbye like I'm already dead." "I'm not. I'm saying thank you for trusting me, for helping me end Voss." His expression softened slightly. "And for showing me that courage isn't about being the strongest or the most dominant. Sometimes it's about being the one willing to walk into the dark so others don't have to." Before Marin could respond, he stepped back and raised his voice. "Move out when ready. And remember, noon deadline, not a minute later." Marin urged her horse forward, the ravens flying ahead to light the path. As the camp disappeared behind her, she felt the weight of what she was doing settle fully onto her shoulders. She was riding toward almost certain death, guided by birds that had spent 15 years sacrificing others to keep her alive, to save a village that feared her. And somewhere ahead, something that called itself winter was waiting. The forest closed in around her, dark and hostile. The ravens' calls echoed through the trees, harsh and urgent. And with each mile, Marin felt the certainty growing that nothing about this night would go as anyone expected. Thornhaven appeared on the horizon as the first gray light of dawn touched the sky. From a distance, it looked peaceful, smoke rising from chimneys, the familiar shape of buildings she'd called home for 3 years. But as Marin drew closer, she saw the wrongness. The streets were empty. No one tended the early gardens, no one drew water from the well. The village was silent as a tomb. The ravens shrieked a warning, but Marin kept riding. She'd made it this far. She wouldn't turn back now. She dismounted in the village square, her legs unsteady. The ravens settled on the roof of Old Barrel's shop, watching with those unreadable eyes. "I'm here," Marin called, her voice echoing off the empty buildings. "Show yourself." For a long moment, nothing. Then a figure emerged from the shadows between 2 buildings. It was tall, wrapped in furs that seemed to shift and move like they were alive. The bone mask covered its face completely, carved into the shape of a wolf's skull. But the worst part was the cold that radiated from it. Not normal cold, but a deep, bone-deep chill that made breathing painful. "Marin Ashwood," the figure said, its voice layered with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from a single throat. "The raven marked, the last of Ashwood, the cursed Omega. So many names for such a small thing." "Where are the villagers?" Marin demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Safe. For now. Locked in their homes, sleeping under my influence. They'll wake unharmed if you cooperate." The figure tilted its head, the gesture eerily similar to the ravens. "Do you know what you are, little Omega?" "I'm nobody, just a survivor." "Liar." The figure laughed, and the sound made Marin's teeth ache. "You are the daughter of prophecy, the child marked by death, the one the old powers chose to carry their legacy." It gestured to the ravens. "They didn't protect you out of kindness. They protected you because you are the key to everything. The lock and the door, the question and the answer." "I don't understand." "Of course you don't. Voss didn't either, the fool. He thought the ravens were his servants, his tools. He never realized they were using him, leading him to slaughter packs across the territories, not randomly, but specifically. Every pack he destroyed, every bloodline he ended, it was all part of the pattern." Marin's blood ran cold. "What pattern?" "The cleansing." The figure spread its arms. "For centuries, the shifter packs have grown soft, weak, corrupt. They've forgotten the old ways, forgotten what it means to be true predators. So the old powers decided to start over, to burn away the rot and let something new grow from the ashes." "You're insane." "I am inevitable." The figure stepped closer, and Marin had to force herself not to retreat. "Voss was the wolf, the culling force, removing the weak. I am the winter, the killing cold, the final ending. And you, little Omega, are the spring, the rebirth, the new beginning." "I'm not part of your twisted plan. You already are." The moment the ravens chose you, the moment they kept you alive while your pack died, you became the center of everything. The figure's voice dropped to something almost gentle. Everyone you've ever loved, everyone who ever sheltered you, they all died so you could reach this moment. So you could stand here, marked and prepared, ready to become what you were always meant to be. The ravens shrieked, their cries almost frantic. Images flooded Marin's mind again. The pattern, the terrible, beautiful pattern. Voss's massacres mapped out over 20 years, forming a shape, a spiral, starting at her childhood home and expanding outward, each attack marking another point on some vast geometric design. And at the center, where the spiral began and ended, stood Thornhaven. "You're going to destroy this village," Marin whispered. "Complete the pattern." "Yes. And you're going to let me, because if you don't, I'll wake every villager and make them tear each other apart while you watch. I'll turn this place into an abattoir that makes Voss's work look merciful." The figure leaned closer. "Or you can accept your role. Let me complete the ritual. Become what you were meant to be and save them all." "What role? What am I supposed to become?" "The first of the new pack, the alpha of alphas, the one who will lead the next generation of shifters into an age of strength and purity." The figure held out a hand, and Marin saw that beneath the furs, its skin was covered in symbols, the same marks that had been on the stone, on the dead scout's chest. "All you have to do is accept the gift. Let the old powers flow into you, become the vessel for their will." Marin looked at the offered hand, at the sleeping village around her, at the ravens watching from their perch. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to fight, to die rather than become whatever this thing wanted. But then she thought of old Beryl, probably sleeping in her shop, of the families who'd grudgingly accepted her presence, of Jace's mother, who told him ravens were good luck. "If I agree," she said slowly, "you swear they'll live? All of them?" "All of them. You have my word, given in the old way, bound by blood and bone." It was a lie. Had to be a lie. But what choice did she have? Darian and his soldiers wouldn't arrive until noon, hours away. She was alone with a monster that could apparently control minds and called itself Winter. Marin reached for the outstretched hand, and the ravens dove, all 7 of them, driving straight for the masked figure with talons extended and beaks opened in silent screams. The figure snarled, backhanding them away, but they kept coming. Not attacking Marin this time, but attacking the Winter itself, buying her precious seconds. Seconds she used to run, not away from the village, but toward Old Beryl's shop. Because if the figure controlled the sleeping villagers, maybe breaking that control would change everything. She burst through the shop door to find Beryl slumped over her counter, breathing but unconscious. Marin shook her, slapped her, screamed in her ear. Nothing worked. "Foolish child," the figure said from the doorway. "You can't wake them. Only I can release them, and I won't until you accept your destiny." Marin's hand fell to the dagger at her belt, the one Jace had insisted she take. "Then I guess we do this the hard way," she said, and lunged. The figure caught her wrist easily, its grip ice-cold and immovable. It pulled her close, the bone mask inches from her face. "You cannot fight what you are," it hissed. "The ravens chose you. The pattern is written. Fighting only delays the inevitable and costs more lives." "Let her go!" The voice came from the door, and Marin's heart leaped. Darian stood there, sword drawn despite his broken wrist, with Kara and a dozen soldiers at his back. "You're early," the figure said, sounding almost amused. "And you're outnumbered." Darian's eyes met Marin's. "Are you hurt?" "Not yet." "Good. Then get behind me." The figure laughed, that terrible multi-layered sound, and released Marin. "You think your weapons can harm me, Alpha King? I am Winter incarnate. I am the ending of all things." "Maybe," Darian said, "but you bleed or you wouldn't bother with threats. And anything that bleeds can die." The figure's posture shifted, and Marin felt power gathering, cold and vast and terrible. This was it. The moment everything either ended or changed forever. And the ravens, still circling overhead, began to sing. Not their usual harsh cause, but something else. Something that sounded almost like words in a language Marin didn't know but somehow understood. "Choose," they sang, "choose who you are, not what they made you, not what they want you to be. Choose. The figure lunged for Darian. Soldiers moved to intercept. And Marin, standing in the center of it all, with ravens singing overhead and the weight of prophecy crushing down on her shoulders, made her choice. She grabbed the bone mask and tore it free. Beneath it was a face she knew, a face she'd seen in her mother's journal, in old pack photographs. Her sister, the one who died in the massacre. Except she wasn't dead. She was something far worse. Elena Ashwood stared back at her with eyes that had once been warm brown, but were now the color of ice over deep water. Her sister, 14 years old when the massacre happened, protective and fierce, who'd taught Marin how to braid her hair and told her stories before bed. The sister whose broken body Marin had seen sprawled across the settlement floor. "You're dead," Marin whispered. "I saw you. You were dying, not dead. There's a difference." Elena's voice was her own now, no longer layered with those terrible harmonics, but it carried a coldness that went bone deep. Voss left me bleeding out, assumed I'd finished the job myself. He didn't know about the old powers stirring beneath the Ashwood territory. Didn't know they'd been waiting for precisely this moment, a vessel desperate enough, angry enough, broken enough to accept their offer. Darian's sword didn't waver. What offer? Survival, power, purpose. Elena's smile was nothing like Marin remembered. They whispered to me as I lay dying, said they could save me if I became their instrument, said the shifter packs had grown corrupt, needed to be pruned, needed someone strong enough to do what was necessary. Her eyes fixed on Marin. Said my baby sister would be the key to everything if I kept her alive long enough. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The ravens hadn't been protecting Marin from Voss. They'd been protecting her from Elena. "You sent them," Marin said. "The ravens. They're yours. They're extensions of the old powers, bound to my will. I sent them to guide you away from the massacre, to keep you safe while I adapted to what I'd become." Elena's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. It took years to fully merge with the power, to learn how to wield winter itself. During that time, I needed you alive, needed you growing into your role. "What role?" Darian demanded. "What does she have to do with your twisted plans?" "Everything." Elena spread her hands and frost crept across the floor from where she stood. The old powers showed me the pattern, 20 years of careful slaughter, removing bloodlines too weak or too corrupted to continue. Voss was my tool, though he never knew it. I whispered in his dreams, guided his targets, made him think he was choosing his victims. But every pack he destroyed was one I selected. Every death served the design. Marin's stomach turned. "You used him. You used Voss to murder innocents." "I used him to prepare the way. And when his purpose was fulfilled, I let you lead an Alpha King right to him." Elena's smile widened. "Did you really think those ravens were trying to help you hunt? They were ensuring Voss died exactly when and where he needed to. His death was always part of the pattern." "You're insane," Kara snarled. "The old powers are myths, stories to scare children." "Are they? Then explain the ravens. Explain how I've survived 15 years without aging, without eating, sustained only by winter's breath." Elena's hand moved, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Frost formed on the soldiers' armor, on their weapons. "Explain how I can do this." The windows exploded inward, and snow poured through, impossible snow, summoned from nothing, swirling into shapes that almost looked like wolves. The soldiers stumbled back, and Marin saw fear flash across even Darian's face. "Stand down," Elena said softly. "All of you, or I wake the villagers and paint Thornhaven red before you can blink." "You said you'd spare them if I cooperated," Marin said. "I said I'd spare them if you accepted your role. You ran instead. You broke the terms." Elena's expression hardened. "But I'm feeling generous. I'll give you one more chance, baby sister. Accept the gift. Become what you were meant to be, or everyone you've ever cared about dies screaming." The snow wolves circled closer, their forms solidifying. Marin could see teeth now, claws, eyes that glowed with cold light. "What happens if I accept?" Marin asked, buying time. "What exactly would I become?" "The first Alpha, the mother of a new generation of shifters, ones born from the old powers rather than corrupted modern bloodlines. You'd be stronger than any alpha alive, powerful enough to reshape the territories into what they should be. And you? I'd be Winter, the eternal force that culls the weak each season, ensuring only the strong survive. Elena's voice took on an almost wistful quality. We'd work together, like we should have all along. Sisters, shaping the future. It was insane, completely, utterly insane. But looking at Elena's face, at what 15 years of whatever she'd become had done to her, Marin saw the truth beneath the madness. Her sister was alone. Had been alone for 15 years, twisted into something inhuman by powers she barely understood, carrying out a plan she probably hadn't even fully chosen. "You're scared," Marin said quietly. Elena's expression flickered. "I'm the incarnation of Winter. I don't feel fear. You're terrified that I'll say no, that you'll have spent 15 years building this pattern, sacrificing everything you were, and it'll all be for nothing." Marin took a step closer, ignoring Darian's sharp intake of breath. "You're scared that you've become a monster alone, and that if I don't join you, you'll realize you could have chosen differently all along." "Marin, don't," Darian started. "You don't know anything," Elena snarled, but her voice cracked. "You were 7 years old playing with dolls while I was fighting to keep our pack alive. You don't know the choices I had to make, the things I had to do to protect you." "Then tell me." "Not the monster version. The real version." Marin stopped just out of Elena's reach. "Tell me what really happened that night." For a long moment, Elena said nothing. The snow wolves held their positions, waiting. The soldiers didn't move. Even the ravens had gone silent, perched on the broken windows like judges awaiting a verdict. "Voss came at moonrise," Elena said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Father tried to negotiate, offered him territory, resources, anything. Voss laughed and tore out his throat. Mother shifted and fought, got 3 of his pack before they brought her down. I grabbed you, tried to get you to safety, but one of the rogues caught me. Broke my back, left me paralyzed on the floor." Her hands clenched into fists. "I could see you hiding in the cellar through a crack in the floorboards. Could see the rogues searching, getting closer. I was bleeding out, couldn't move, couldn't fight, couldn't even scream a warning. And then I heard them. The old powers, buried deep beneath our territory, waking after centuries of sleep. They said they could give me strength if I let them in, said I could save you if I became their vessel." "So you accepted," Marin said. "What else could I do? Let you die? Let Voss slaughter a 7-year-old child?" Elena's voice broke. "I said yes, and the power flooded into me. It hurt, like ice in my veins, burning and freezing at the same time, but it healed me, made me strong enough to kill the rogues searching for you, strong enough to make Voss retreat when he felt what I'd become. But it changed you. It consumed me." Elena looked at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. "By the time you emerged from the cellar, I was more power than person. The old voices were so loud, showing me the pattern, the plan, the purpose. They said the corruption in the packs went deep, that drastic measures were needed. And I was so angry, so full of rage at what had been taken from us, that I believed them. You could have stayed with me, helped me. No, I couldn't. The power needed time to settle, to fully merge with my body and mind. If I'd stayed, I might have hurt you, might have let the old powers use me to kill you before the pattern was ready." Elena's ice-blue eyes met Marin's. "So I sent the ravens. My last act of will before I fully surrendered to Winter. 7 ravens, 1 for each year you'd been alive, to guide you and guard you until the time was right." Marin's throat tightened. 15 years. Her sister had been alive for 15 years, twisted into a monster, carrying out massacres, all because she'd tried to save a 7-year-old in a cellar. "The pattern is almost complete," Elena continued, her voice strengthening. "One more death, one more sacrifice, and the old powers can fully manifest. The territories will be cleansed, and a new age can begin. All you have to do is accept your role. Let me complete what I started." "One more death," Marin repeated. "Whose?" Elena smiled sadly. "Mine." The word hung in the air like a blade. Behind Marin, she heard Darian's sharp intake of breath, heard weapons shifting as soldiers recalculated the threat. "You want me to kill you. Marin said slowly. I want you to free me. The old powers promised me strength, but they didn't mention the cost. I can't die naturally anymore. Can't age, can't sicken, can't rest. I'm bound to winter until the pattern completes. Elena's expression cracked, showing something raw and human beneath. I've been alone for 15 years, baby sister, watching you from a distance, unable to speak to you, unable to hold you, just existing as this thing, this tool, carrying out someone else's grand design. Then stop, walk away from the pattern, refuse to complete it. I can't. The power won't let me. It needs completion, needs closure, needs the final sacrifice to fully manifest in this world. Elena stepped closer, and Marin saw tears freezing on her cheeks. But if you accept the gift, if you become the first alpha, you can end me. The old powers will transfer to you, and I'll finally be free to die, to rest, to join mother and father and everyone else we lost. And if I refuse, then the power stays with me forever. I remain winter, bound to cull and kill season after season, year after year, while you and everyone you love eventually grows old and dies, leaving me alone again. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. Please, I'm so tired, Marin. So tired of being cold, of being alone, of being this thing that isn't me anymore. Let me go. Become what I couldn't be, strong enough to carry the power without letting it consume you. The ravens shrieked, their calls desperate and urgent. Images flooded Marin's mind, futures branching like frost patterns. If she accepted, she'd gain power beyond imagining, but risk becoming exactly what Elena had become. If she refused, Elena would remain trapped, and the old powers would eventually find another vessel, starting this nightmare all over again. There's a third option, Darian said, his voice cutting through the tension. Kill the power itself. Elena laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. You can't kill something that never lived. The old powers aren't creatures. They're forces. Primal aspects of the world given consciousness and purpose. Everything has a weakness, Darian insisted. Everything can be fought. Not this. Not without strength equal to theirs. Elena looked at Marin. Only someone carrying the old power can truly oppose the old power. That's why you have to accept, baby sister. Not to serve them, but to fight them from within. To take what they offer, and then refuse to use it as they intend. Marin's mind raced. Accept demonic power to fight demonic power. Become the monster to slay the monster. It was classic tragedy, the kind of choice that left no winners. Show me, she said. What? Show me the power. Let me see what I'd become before I decide. Elena hesitated, then nodded. She raised her hands, and the temperature dropped so sharply that Marin's next breath came out as ice crystals. The snow wolves solidified fully, becoming something more than conjured weather, actual creatures of winter given form and purpose. This is the smallest fraction of what the old powers can do, Elena said. With the full gift, you could freeze armies, summon blizzards, reshape the very landscape. You'd be untouchable, unkillable, eternal. And alone, Marin added, cut off from everything human, twisted into something else. Not if you're strong enough to resist, not if you remember who you are beneath the power. Elena's expression turned pleading. I was 14 and broken when I accepted. You're stronger than I was. Smarter. You've survived 15 years of isolation and fear. You know how to hold on to yourself when the world tries to break you. One of the ravens landed on Marin's shoulder, its weight familiar and grounding. She looked into its black eyes and saw her own reflection, small, scared, but still standing. The bird made that clicking sound, then spoke. Actually spoke, in a voice that sounded like wind through winter branches. Choose, it said. Not what she wants, not what they want. What you want. Everyone froze. Even Elena looked shocked. The ravens can talk, Jace whispered from behind Darian. Only when the choice is truly free, Elena said slowly. Only when the old powers relinquish their control and let their instruments act with full will, which means they're releasing you, Marin finished. The old powers are giving you a choice too. Complete the pattern or don't. It's up to you now. Elena stared at her hands, flexing fingers that no longer seemed quite so frost-covered. I can feel it. The pressure in my mind, the voices driving me forward, they're quiet. For the first time in 15 years, I can think clearly. Then think, Darian said sharply. You've spent 15 years as a weapon. What do you want to be now? The question hung in the air. Marin watched her sister's face cycle through emotions: confusion, fear, hope, grief. So many feelings that had been frozen for so long, suddenly thawing all at once. I want to stop, Elena whispered. I want to stop hurting people. Stop being winter. Stop being alone. She looked at Marin with eyes that were turning from ice blue back to brown. But I don't know how. The power is part of me now. Even if the old voices are silent, I still carry winter in my bones. Then we find a way to remove it, Marin said firmly. Together. There is no way. I told you. You told me what the old powers wanted you to believe. That doesn't make it true. Marin stepped forward, closing the distance between them. You saved me 15 years ago by accepting their deal. Now let me save you by refusing it. The ravens exploded into flight, all 7 circling the room in tight spirals. Their voices rose in that strange, not-quite song, and Marin felt something shift in the air. The snow wolves began to dissolve, falling back into ordinary snow. The frost on the walls started melting. What's happening? Kara demanded. The pattern is breaking, Elena said, wonder in her voice. She's breaking it, just by refusing, by offering a different path. The old powers are losing their hold. But you said they needed completion. They needed willing completion. A vessel choosing to ascend, choosing to carry their purpose forward. But if the chosen vessel refuses, if she offers redemption instead of power, Elena gasped as warmth flooded back into her features. It creates a paradox. The pattern can't complete, but it can't restart either. It just unravels. The raven's song grew louder, more insistent. Images flooded Marin's mind again, but different this time. Not visions of possible futures, but memories. The ravens guiding her through the forest. The ravens warning her away from danger. The ravens sitting vigil on her windowsill through long, lonely nights. They hadn't been weapons or tools. They'd been Elena's love, given form, the last piece of her humanity, refusing to let her baby sister die alone. Thank you, Marin whispered to them, for everything. The birds dove, landing on Elena's shoulders, her arms, her head. She stood motionless as they covered her, their black feathers merging with the furs she wore. Light began building beneath the feathers. Not cold ice light, but something warmer. It's burning out, Elena said, her voice filled with awe and pain. The power is burning out of me. The ravens are pulling it free, taking it back to wherever it came from. Will it hurt you? Marin moved closer, ready to intervene. It already hurts, but it's a good hurt, like feeling returning to frozen limbs. Elena met her eyes, and Marin saw her sister there. Really saw her for the first time in 15 years. I'm sorry for all of it, for the villages, for the deaths, for using you as bait to draw Voss out. I thought I was being strong, being purposeful, but I was just scared and alone and letting the voices tell me what to do. I know. I forgive you. You shouldn't. I don't care what you deserve. You're my sister, and you saved me when you could have let me die. That counts for something. The light grew blinding. Darian shouted a warning, pulling Marin back as the ravens and Elena became one brilliant point of burning white. The soldiers shielded their eyes. The remaining snow in the room flashed to steam. Then, as quickly as it had started, it ended. Elena collapsed, and Marin caught her. Her sister felt impossibly light, like she'd been hollowed out. The furs were gone, replaced by simple clothes that looked centuries old. The bone mask had crumbled to dust. And the ravens? The ravens were gone. No, Marin whispered, looking around desperately. No, where did they go? Back, Elena murmured weakly. Back to the source. They were bound to the power, and when it left... She coughed, and Marin saw blood on her lips. I'm dying. Actually dying this time. The power was the only thing keeping this body alive. Then we'll get a healer. Darian, send for... No healers can fix this, baby sister. I died 15 years ago. I've just been borrowing time. Elena's hand found Marin's, her grip weak but warm. Actually warm for the first time in their reunion. It's okay. I'm ready. I've been ready for so long. Tears burned in Marin's eyes. I just got you back. I can't lose you again. You never lost me. I was always there, watching through the raven's eyes, making sure you were safe. Every village you lived in, every friend you made, every small victory you celebrated, I was there. Elena smiled, and it was her old smile, the one Marin remembered from childhood. I'm so proud of who you've become, so proud that you chose kindness over power, redemption over revenge. Elena, tell them I'm sorry. The villages, the packs, everyone affected by what I did. Tell them I thought I was saving the world, but I was just a scared girl who made terrible choices. Her breathing grew shallower. And tell them you're not cursed. You never were. You were blessed by your sister's love, and that's the opposite of a curse. The words cut deep because they were goodbye. Marin pulled Elena close, holding her like she'd wanted to for 15 years. I love you, she whispered. I never stopped. I know. I love you too. Always did. Always will. Elena's eyes drifted closed. Fly free, baby sister. No more ravens, no more running, just fly. Her last breath came out as a sigh, and then she was gone. Actually gone this time, no power to sustain her, no old voices to puppet her body. Just Elena Ashwood, 14 years old forever, finally at rest. Marin sat there holding her sister's body as dawn broke fully over Thornhaven. Around them, the village began stirring, people waking from Elena's enforced sleep, confused and disoriented. Someone screamed, probably finding the broken windows. Voices called out, seeking answers. Darian knelt beside Marin, his good hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry. She saved me twice. Once from Voss, once from the old powers. Marin's voice was steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. She was a monster, but she was also my sister, and she fought so hard to remember which one mattered more. We'll give her full honors, a proper burial, a memorial, recognition of her sacrifice. She doesn't need honors. She needs forgiveness. Marin looked up at him. From everyone she hurt, everyone who suffered because of the pattern, I can't give her that alone. Then we'll try together. Darian helped her stand, careful of Elena's body. The territories need to know what happened here. The truth, all of it. Let them decide what her legacy should be. Outside, Old Barrel's voice rose above the confusion. Where's the Omega? Where's Marin? The ravens are gone. Where did they go? Kara appeared in the doorway. The villagers are asking for you. They remember feeling cold, remember something dark in their minds, but the details are fuzzy. What do you want me to tell them? Marin looked at Elena's peaceful face, then at the rising sun painting Thornhaven in shades of gold and pink. No more ravens, no more pattern, no more running. Tell them the curse is broken, she said. Tell them they're safe now. And tell them I'm not going anywhere. This is my home, and I'm staying. For the first time in 15 years, she actually believed it. The words hung in this morning air like a promise Marin wasn't sure she could keep. Behind her, she heard Kara relay the message to the gathering crowd, heard the murmurs of confusion and relief that followed. But all she could focus on was Elena's body in her arms, still warm but growing colder, and the impossible weight of what staying actually meant. We need to prepare her for burial, Darian said gently. And you need rest. When did you last sleep? Marin couldn't remember. The past 48 hours blurred together, hunting Voss, the ravine battle, the ride to Thornhaven, the confrontation with Elena. Her body felt like it was held together by sheer will and rapidly fraying threads. I'll rest after, she said, after we've done right by her. Jace appeared with a clean cloth, offering it silently. Marin took it and began wiping the blood from Elena's face, the ritual of it grounding her. Around them, soldiers were organizing the civilians, explaining what they could, deflecting questions they couldn't answer. The Omega saved us, Old Barrel's voice cut through the chaos. Whatever happened here, she put herself between us and it. I felt it, that cold thing in my mind, trying to make me do terrible things. And then it was gone, and I heard her voice saying we were safe. She's cursed, someone else argued. Those ravens. The ravens are gone, Beryl snapped. Look at the sky. When's the last time you saw morning in Thornhaven without those black birds watching? She broke whatever curse there was. Marin glanced up to see the old woman pushing through the crowd, still in her nightclothes but standing straight and defiant. Their eyes met, and Beryl's expression softened. "You stayed," the old woman said. "You could have run when that thing came for you, but you stayed and fought for us. That means something." "I brought it here," Marin replied, her voice rough. "If I'd never come to Thornhaven, then we'd have been hit by whatever other monster was prowling the territories. Don't diminish what you did, girl. You stood between evil and innocence. That's the definition of courage." Other villagers were nodding now, some approaching cautiously. Marin saw people she'd healed, families she'd helped, faces that had looked at her with fear and suspicion for 3 years. The fear was still there, but tempered now with something else. Gratitude, respect, recognition. "We'll need to send word to the other territories," Darian said, pulling Marin's attention back. "About Voss, about the pattern, about what really happened here. The packs deserve to know the truth." "They'll want someone to blame," Kara said bluntly. "The sister's dead, but the Omega's alive. Guess who they'll target?" "Then they'll have to go through me." Darian's voice carried absolute conviction. Marin acted to save lives, not end them. Anyone who wants to punish her for that answers to the crown. "The crown might not be enough," Kara warned. "Some of those packs lost entire bloodlines. They'll want blood for blood." "Then I'll give them mine," Marin said quietly. "If it brings peace—" "No." Darian turned to face her fully, his storm-gray eyes intense. "You don't get to martyr yourself after everything you've survived. We tell the truth, and we trust that enough people will see it for what it is. And if they don't, we fight. But we don't surrender you to appease grief-mad alphas." The fierce protectiveness in his voice stirred something in Marin's chest, something warm and unfamiliar and terrifying in its intensity. She'd spent 15 years learning not to depend on anyone, and here was an Alpha King declaring he'd go to war rather than let her be harmed. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do that for me?" Darian's expression shifted, revealing vulnerability beneath the command. "Because in the past 2 days, you've shown more courage than most soldiers show in a lifetime. Because you chose mercy over vengeance, redemption over power. Because—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "Because somewhere between the ravine and here, I stopped seeing you as a tool to hunt Voss and started seeing you as someone worth protecting for your own sake." The moment stretched between them, charged with things neither seemed ready to name. Then Jace cleared his throat awkwardly, breaking the tension. "Not to interrupt, but we've got incoming. 3 riders moving fast." Everyone's hands went to weapons, but the riders bore the crimson and black banner of the Northern Territories. Messengers, not enemies. They pulled up in the village square, dismounting quickly. "My lord," the lead messenger said, addressing Darian. "Urgent news from the capital. 4 packs have petitioned the crown for justice against the one responsible for the massacres. They're demanding trial by combat, with the defendant being—" He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Being who?" Darian's voice went dangerously soft. "The raven-marked Omega, my lord. They claim she bears responsibility for marking villages for slaughter, regardless of intent or knowledge." Silence fell over the square. Marin felt every eye turn toward her, weighing, judging. Her hands tightened on Elena's body. "Tell them the defendant accepts," she said. "Marin, no," Darian started. "Tell them I accept, but on one condition. I choose the terms of combat." She met the messenger's eyes. "Not physical battle, because we all know how that would end. An Omega against Alphas? That's execution, not justice. Instead, I propose a trial of truth. Let each accusing pack present their grievance. Let me respond with a full story of what happened. Then let neutral Alphas from uninvolved territories decide if I bear guilt or if I'm another victim of the pattern." The messenger looked to Darian, who nodded slowly. "It's within her rights under the old laws. Trial by testimony instead of trial by combat, invoked when the defendant claims extenuating circumstances. The packs may not accept. They will if they actually want justice instead of just blood," Marin interrupted. "And if they don't accept, it proves they're not interested in truth, which undermines their entire claim." A fierce grin crossed Kara's scarred face. "Smart. Back them into a corner where refusing makes them look vengeful instead of righteous." "When?" Darian asked the messenger. They're demanding immediate assembly, 3 days from now at the Capitol. All involved parties must appear, or judgment defaults to the accusers. 3 days. Marin looked down at Elena's body, at her sister's peaceful face. Not enough time to properly mourn, but enough time to prepare for what might be her final stand. Then we ride at dawn tomorrow, Darian said, after we've given Elena Ashwood the burial she deserves. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. A grave was dug in the small cemetery on Thornhaven's outskirts, beneath an old oak tree. Soldiers helped construct a simple but sturdy coffin. Villagers brought flowers, hesitant at first, then more freely as old Beryl set the example. She was twisted by powers beyond her control, the old woman declared. But in the end, she chose love over darkness. That's worth remembering. As the sun began its descent toward evening, they gathered for the burial. Marin had expected a small service, just herself and maybe a few soldiers. Instead, nearly the entire village turned out. They stood in respectful silence as Darian spoke words about sacrifice and redemption, about the price of power and the strength of choosing differently. Then it was Marin's turn. She stepped forward, looking down at the coffin that held what remained of her family. Elena was 14 when she died the first time, she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. She was fierce and protective and loved telling stories. She taught me how to braid my hair, how to track deer, how to laugh even when things were hard. The thing that killed our pack, the thing that wore her face for 15 years, that wasn't her. That was what happened when a desperate girl made an impossible choice to save someone she loved. She paused, gathering strength. I'm not asking you to forgive what she did. The pack she helped destroy, the lives ended by the pattern, that blood is real and the pain is real. But I'm asking you to understand that she was a victim too, used by powers that saw her love as a weakness to exploit. And in the end, she broke free of them. She chose to stop, to unravel everything she'd built, to die as herself rather than live as their weapon. Marin knelt, placing her hand on the coffin. Fly free, Elena. No more voices. No more winter. Just rest, and know that I'll carry your memory, all of it, the good and the terrible, and try to be worthy of the sacrifice you made. They lowered the coffin into the earth. Marin threw the first handful of dirt, then stepped back to let others do the same. Even some who'd lost family to the pattern came forward, offering their own words of grudging respect or angry mourning or complicated grief. When it was done, when the grave was filled and marked with a simple stone bearing Elena's name and the years she'd actually lived, not the 15 she'd spent as something else, Marin finally allowed herself to collapse. Darian caught her, guiding her to a bench near the cemetery entrance. You need food and sleep in that order, he said firmly. I need to prepare for the trial. You need to be able to stand upright first. The trial won't matter if you're dead from exhaustion. He signaled to Jace, who appeared with bread, cheese, and water. Eat. Then we'll talk strategy. Marin ate mechanically, barely tasting the food. Around them, the village returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after what had happened. Children played, cautiously at first, then with increasing enthusiasm as parents realized the danger had truly passed. Merchants reopened their stalls. Life continued. It's strange, Marin said. Everything changed, but everything's also the same. That's how it always is. The world keeps turning, even through crisis. Darian leaned back, studying the darkening sky. Tell me about the villages, the ones that were attacked after you left. Over the next hour, Marin recounted what she could remember about each place. Redwater, Millstone, Ashford, Greentree, Oakshade, and River Run. Who she'd known there, how long she'd stayed, why she'd left. Darian listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a piece of parchment. 6 villages over 14 years, he said when she finished. But you've been in Thornhaven for 3 years, and it wasn't attacked until today, and then only because Elena needed to complete the pattern. That suggests the attacks weren't about you leaving. They were about the pattern itself, with your movements being coincidental or used as convenient markers. The accusers won't see it that way. Then we make them see it. We present the evidence, show the timeline, demonstrate that you had no knowledge and no control. Darian's expression hardened. And we make damn sure they understand that punishing you would be punishing the victim of a 15-year manipulation. Kara approached, dropping onto the bench beside them. I sent scouts to the other villages, the ones that were attacked. They'll gather witness statements, confirm timelines, collect anything that might support your case. Should have preliminary reports by the time we reach the capital. Thank you, Marin said, surprised. Don't thank me yet. Some of those packs are out for blood, and they don't care much about evidence when they've got grief and rage driving them. Kira's expression was grim. You need to understand what you're walking into. Trial of truth or not, there will be alphas in that room who want you dead, who need someone to blame, and you're the only living target left. I know. Do you? Because it's one thing to know intellectually, another to stand in a room full of predators calling for your head. Kira leaned forward. I've seen strong fighters break under that kind of pressure, confess to things they didn't do just to make the accusation stop. You're an Omega, which means every instinct you have will be screaming at you to submit, to appease, to make the alphas stop being angry. I won't break, Marin said quietly. How can you be sure? Because I've already survived the worst thing I could imagine. I watched my pack die, lived 15 years as a cursed outcast, discovered my sister became a monster trying to save me and held her as she died for real. Whatever those alphas throw at me can't be worse than that. Kira studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're strong enough. She stood. But just in case, we'll make sure you've got backup. The soldiers who fought with you, who saw what you did in that ravine and here in Thornhaven, they'll testify. Won't let the accusers paint you as some scheming curse-bringer when we know the truth. As Kara walked away, Marin felt the weight of what was coming settle fully onto her shoulders. 3 days. 3 days to prepare for a trial that would determine not just her fate, but how history remembered everything that had happened. Whether Elena would be seen as a monster or a tragedy. Whether the pattern would be understood as manipulation or blamed on cursed bloodlines. Come on, Darian said, standing and offering his hand. I'm getting you to an actual bed before you fall asleep on this bench. Marin let him pull her to her feet. They walked through Thornhaven's quiet streets, past houses showing candlelight in windows, past the inn where rooms had been secured for the soldiers. Darian led her to a small cottage on the edge of the village, the same cottage she'd called home for 3 years. How did you know where I lived? She asked. Kara asked around. Figured you'd rest better in familiar surroundings than in a camp tent. He paused at the door. I can post guards if you want, or I can leave you alone. Whatever you need. Marin looked at the cottage, at the herb garden she'd tended, the wind chimes she'd hung, the small signs of a life she'd built brick by brick. For 3 years, this had been her sanctuary, her place of safety in a world that feared her. Now the ravens were gone. The curse was broken, and she had no idea who she was without them. Stay, she heard herself say, just for a while. I don't want to be alone yet. Darian nodded and followed her inside. The cottage was exactly as she'd left it, herbs drying from the rafters, books stacked on the table, her mother's journal in its place of honor on the shelf. They sat in the simple wooden chairs, and for a while neither spoke. What will you do? Darian finally asked. After the trial, I mean. Assuming we win. I haven't thought that far ahead. Think about it now. What does Marin Ashwood want from life when she's not running or surviving or carrying the weight of a 15-year curse? The question hit deeper than Marin expected. What did she want? For 15 years she'd wanted safety, wanted the ravens gone, wanted to stop being feared. All of that was happening, and she felt unmoored rather than relieved. I want to heal people, she said slowly. Really heal them. Not just treat symptoms while they're terrified, I'll curse them. I want to help rebuild the packs that were destroyed, help orphans like I was. I want to make Elena's victims understand that they mattered, that their deaths weren't meaningless even though they served an evil purpose. That's a worthy goal, ambitious, probably impossible. Most worthy goals are. Darian's expression softened. For what it's worth, I think you could do it. You've got the strength, the knowledge, and the compassion. Just need the opportunity. And political backing, Marin added wryly. Hard to rebuild trust when half the territories want you executed. Then we win the trial. We make them see the truth. He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. And afterward, I offer you a position. Official healer to the crown, with authority to travel the territories, access to resources, protection from retribution. You could do real good, Marin. Change lives. Change how Omegas are seen across the Northern Territories. The offer was staggering. Everything she'd never dared dream of, handed to her by an Alpha King who'd known her for 3 days. Why? She asked. Why would you do that? Darian was quiet for a moment, seeming to wrestle with something. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. Because somewhere in the past 3 days, I stopped seeing you as the Omega who could help me find my brother's killer and started seeing you as Marin, a woman who's brave and kind and stronger than she knows, who chose mercy when revenge would have been easier, who stood between evil and innocence without hesitation. He met her eyes. And because I think you could teach the territories something they desperately need to learn, that strength isn't just about dominance and power. Sometimes it's about choosing differently, even when it costs everything. The words hung between them, charged with meaning that went beyond politics or strategy. Marin felt her breath catch, felt something shift in the air. Darian, a knock at the door interrupted whatever she might have said. Kara's voice came through. My lord, scouts are back with preliminary reports. You'll want to hear this. The moment broke. Darian stood, professional mask sliding back into place. I'll be right there. He looked back at Marin. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we ride hard for the capital, and you'll need your strength. After he left, Marin sat in the silence of her cottage, processing everything. The trial loomed like a storm on the horizon, threatening to destroy her or vindicate her. But underneath the fear, she felt something else stirring. Hope. Fragile and tentative, but real. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could stand before the accusing Pax and tell her truth. Maybe she could honor Elena's sacrifice by refusing to let it be in vain. Maybe, just maybe, she could finally stop running. The next 3 days blurred together in a rush of preparation and travel. They rode hard for the capital, pushing the horses to their limits. Along the way, more scouts returned with witness statements, people from the destroyed villages who'd survived, who remembered Marin living among them, who confirmed she'd left peacefully and had no knowledge of the attacks that followed. The evidence was building, but so was the opposition. Word of the trial spread, and by the time they reached the capital, crowds had gathered. Some shouted support, holding signs declaring justice, not vengeance. Others called for blood, their voices raw with grief. Cursed Omega. Burn the Deathbringer. My children died because of you. Marin forced herself to keep her head high as they rode through the capital streets. Darian rode beside her, a solid presence, with soldiers forming a protective barrier. But she could feel the hatred, the pain, the desperate need for someone to blame. The trial was held in the Great Hall, a massive stone building that could hold hundreds. It was packed to capacity, with representatives from every major pack in the Northern Territories. The 4 accusing packs sat in positions of prominence, leaders whose bloodlines had been nearly destroyed by the pattern. As Marin entered, silence fell. Every eye tracked her movement to the defendant's position, a simple chair in the center of the room, surrounded on all sides by those who would judge her. The head judge, an elderly alpha named Thornwick, who held no allegiance to any pack, called the assembly to order. We gather to hear testimony regarding the Raven-marked Omega and her alleged role in 17-pack massacres spanning 20 years. The defendant has invoked trial of truth rather than combat. This is her right under the old laws. We will hear from the accusers, then from the defendant, then from any supporting witnesses. After all testimony is heard, the neutral counsel will deliberate and render judgment. The first accuser stood, a woman named Dessa, whose entire family had died in the Redwater massacre. That creature, she said, pointing at Marin, lived in Redwater for 6 months. We took her in, gave her work, ignored the cursed ravens. And how did she repay us? By marking us for slaughter. 3 months after she left, Voss came. My husband, my children, my parents, all dead. And she walked away untouched. The words hit like physical blows, but Marin forced herself to stay still, to listen. More accusers followed, each telling similar stories. Marin in their villages, living quietly. Marin leaving, attacks following. The pattern was damning when presented without context. Finally, it was Marin's turn. She stood, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes, feeling her Omega instinct screaming at her to submit, to make the Alphas' anger stop. She took a breath and began to speak. Everything they've said is true. I lived in those villages. I left. Attacks followed. But what they haven't told you is why. Her voice carried through the hall, steadier than she felt. I was 7 years old when Voss massacred my pack. The only reason I survived was because my sister, Marin Ashwood, made a deal with the old powers. She became their vessel, became winter incarnate, to save my life. And the price of that power was that she had to carry out a pattern, 20 years of carefully selected massacres to cleanse the territories. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marin pressed on. Elena sent ravens to protect me, to guide me away from danger. But those same ravens were extensions of her power, and she used them to mark targets. Not because I led her to villages, but because the old powers needed the pattern completed in a specific way, and my movements provided convenient cover. I had no knowledge of this, no control over it. I was a tool, just like Voss, just like Elena herself, wielded by powers that saw us all as instruments. Lies, Dessa shouted. You expect us to believe you knew nothing, that you just happened to leave every village before it was destroyed? I left because I was never welcome to stay, because people feared me, called me cursed, made it clear I wasn't wanted. So yes, I moved frequently, trying to find somewhere I could belong. That's not guilt. That's the result of being ostracized for something I couldn't control. Thornwick raised a hand for silence. You claim your sister was controlled by the old powers. Can you prove this? I can testify to what I saw, Darian said, standing. I was there when the Omega confronted her sister in Thornhaven. I saw the power burning out of Marin Ashwood as the ravens pulled it free. I heard her confession, her apology, her final words acknowledging what she'd become and choosing to stop it. And I saw Marin refuse the same power when it was offered to her, breaking the pattern instead of completing it. The Alpha King has obvious bias, one of the accusers argued. He needs the Omega to justify his own failure to stop the massacres earlier. Then hear from us, Kara said, standing with a dozen soldiers. We fought in the ravine battle. We saw Voss die. We saw the Omega risk her life to save Thornhaven when she could have run. We saw her make choices that prioritized others' lives over her own safety. That's not the behavior of someone orchestrating massacres. Witness after witness stood. Soldiers, villagers from Thornhaven, even people from the villages that had been attacked who confirmed Marin's presence had been benign. Her departure unremarkable until violence followed. The testimony went on for hours. The sun crossed the sky, shadows lengthening in the great hall. And slowly Marin saw the mood shift, the absolute certainty of her guilt cracking, doubts forming. Finally, Thornwick called for closing statements. Dessa stood one last time. Even if she didn't know, even if she was used, my family is still dead. Someone has to pay for that. Someone has to answer for the blood spilled. You're right, Marin said quietly, standing to face her accuser directly. Someone does have to answer, but that someone isn't me. It's the old powers that manipulated all of us. It's the system that ostracized me for being different, making me move constantly and providing the pattern's cover. It's the violence that runs so deep in our culture that we'd rather execute a victim than acknowledge the complexity of what happened. She took a step toward Dessa. I can't bring your family back. I can't undo the pain you've suffered, but I can promise that if you let me live, I'll spend the rest of my life honoring their memory. I'll work to heal the territories, to help orphans like I was, to make sure what happened to me and to you never happens again. Kill me, and you get revenge. Spare me, and you get change. Choose. The silence that followed was absolute. Marin stood in the center of that massive hall, surrounded by predators, and waited for judgment. Thornwick conferred with the neutral council in low voices. Minutes stretched into eternities. Finally, he stood. We find the defendant not guilty of orchestrating or knowingly enabling the massacres. The evidence shows she was manipulated, used as unwitting cover for a pattern she neither designed nor understood. However, he paused, and Marin's heart sank. However, we recognize the accuser's pain and their need for justice. Therefore, we impose the following. Marin Ashwood will dedicate the next 5 years to restitution service, working to rebuild destroyed packs and help survivors. She will be monitored, her movements reported, and any suspicious activity will result in immediate retrial. After 5 years of faithful service, she will be granted full pardon and freedom to live without restriction. It wasn't perfect, but it was life. It was a chance. I accept, Marin said clearly. Dessa looked like she wanted to argue, but Thornwick's gavel came down with finality. This court is adjourned. Justice is served. The crowd erupted into arguments and discussions, but Marin barely heard them. She'd won. Not completely, not without conditions, but she'd won. She was alive, and she had a purpose. Darian caught her as she swayed. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, she corrected. I couldn't have survived that alone. Outside the great hall, the crowds had thinned. Some still shouted accusations, but others, more than Marin expected, offered words of support or acknowledgement. She'd changed minds. Not all of them, but enough. That evening, as the sun set over the Capitol, Marin stood on the balcony of the rooms Darian had arranged for her. The sky was painted in shades of gold and crimson, and for the first time in 15 years, no ravens dotted the horizon. The silence felt strange, empty, but also free. You were right, she said as Darian joined her, about worthy goals usually being impossible. But you're going to try anyway. I have to. 5 years of restitution service. That's 5 years to prove that Omegas can be strong, that victims can become healers, that cycles of violence can be broken. She looked at him. And I'm going to need help, support, people willing to stand with me even when it's hard. You have that already. Darian's hand found hers, warm and solid. A company of soldiers who fought beside you, villagers who saw what you sacrificed, an alpha king who believes in what you're trying to build. Is that all you are? An alpha king who believes in my mission? The question hung between them, charged with everything they'd carefully not said over the past days. Darian's expression shifted, vulnerability showing through the command. No, he said quietly. I'm also a man who's spent the last 3 days watching you face impossible odds with courage and grace, who's seen you choose mercy over revenge, redemption over power, truth over comfort, who's realized that somewhere in this mess, I started hoping you'd choose to stay. Not because I commanded it, not because duty demanded it, but because you wanted to. Marin's breath caught. Darian, I know it's too soon. I know you've got 5 years of service ahead, a legacy to rebuild, a sister to honor. But when those 5 years are done, when you're free to choose your own path without conditions, he stepped closer. I hope you'll consider choosing one that includes me, not as Alpha King and healer, but as two people who survived hell together and came out stronger for it. It was too much, too fast, too intense. But looking into his storm-gray eyes, seeing the hope and fear and fierce determination there, Marin felt something unlock in her chest. Ask me again in 5 years, she said softly, when I've proven I can be more than the cursed Omega, more than Elena's sister, more than a victim. Ask me when I'm free, and I'll give you an answer. Promise? I promise. They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon, watching the stars emerge one by one. Somewhere in the territories, villages were rebuilding. Orphans were growing up. The patterns of violence that had defined their world for so long were slowly, painfully starting to shift. And Marin Ashwood, once marked by death and ravens, now marked only by her choices, felt the future unfold before her like wings spreading wide. No more running, no more hiding, just flying forward into whatever came next, knowing that for the first time in 15 years, she wasn't alone. The ravens were gone. The curse was broken. And the woman who remained, scarred but unbroken, grieving but hopeful, small but impossibly strong, was finally ready to become who she was always meant to be. Not a weapon, not a tool, not a victim, just Marin. And that was enough. 5 years later, on a spring morning bright with promise, an Alpha King would ask a question, and a healer who'd spent those years rebuilding lives and mending what had been broken would give her answer. But that was a story for another time. For now, as the last light faded from the sky, Marin stood on a balcony with her hand in Darian's, looking toward a horizon finally free of black wings, and smiled. The ending had become a beginning, and she was ready to see where it led.